and let us all do we can to build a better future.
All right, something unique happened in Congress today, and it's important that we talk about it. RFK Jr., who is running for the nomination for the Democratic Party against Joe Biden, testified before Congress in regards towards internet censorship that we here at Hard Lens Media are all too familiar with. Now, I want to mention some people who are also being impacted by censorship. So since Hard Lens Media has been created, we're very well aware of that there are rules and guidelines on all social media platforms, which is understandable. I get it. I get it. But as we kept on growing and as we saw more independent media networks rise up, we saw that there was a shift in the tone in regards to internet policies and guidelines, and the rules were being changed, and politicians being thin-skinned snowflakes. In 2020, and since then, Hard Lens Media suffered not one, but 8 YouTube strikes. Now, thankfully, thanks to our beautiful, outstanding audience and our allies in independent media, we've been able to defeat them all. But unfortunately, a lot of our other colleagues in independent media have not been lucky. RBN is currently dealing with not 1, but 2 strikes. I saw the reason why, and YouTube has made a very, very severe mistake. And I want to see RBN reinstated. I want to see those 2 strikes removed, because I know what it's like when your network is going to be removed or you can't go live on it. When you have a team of people and you have work that you're supposed to be doing, YouTube is hindering it. The censorship is all too real. There are stories you're not allowed to talk about, words that are far more vile than swear words when they're actually names of individuals. That's right. That's how bad things are getting. Our colleagues in Indie News Network have been severely suppressed and censored. And a lot of other people have been censored and silenced. And of course, you had all the Vote Blue No Matter Who people dancing and singing in the streets now that Trump was removed off of Twitter. But again, Vote Blue No Matter Who, just because Trump's not on Twitter, you think him and his millions of supporters and volunteers are going to disappear in the night? Should show you how childish they really are. But there's so many people saying censor, 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 censor. And I'm against it. And look, there's a lot of things I disagree with RFK Jr. However, I do agree with him that there is a lot of censorship that's happening, and it needs to be addressed. It needs to be stopped. So why don't I pull up this first article right here. RFK Jr. will testify at a House hearing over online censorship as the GOP elevates Biden's rival. So again, look, he's there talking about censorship. I don't see Biden talking about censorship, so there you go. House Republicans are delving into claims of government censorship of online speech at a public hearing, asking if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to testify despite requests from outside groups to disinvite the Democratic presidential candidate after his recent, questionable anti-Semitic remarks. Again, the Republican-led subcommittee of the weaponization of the federal government was convening Thursday. Republicans claim conservatives are being unfairly targeted by technology companies that routinely work with the government to try and stem the spread of disinformation online. So I just want to make something very clear here. It's not only conservatives that are being targeted. It's been progressives. It's been independents. It's been libertarians. This has been going on for a very long time, since 2018. It has intensified in 2020 and has been getting worse ever since then. Many people are being silenced. Many people are being suppressed. We've seen it firsthand. So first and foremost, let's hear from the Vote Blue No Matter Who Democrats, where we see people like, Debbie Wasserman Schultz or other Democrats saying, "Oh my goodness, we need to bring accountability. We have to censor. We have to censor." So let's pull up this first video here.
What does this have to do with inflation? What does this have to do with the cost of living? What does this have to do with the everyday lives of Americans? The thing that the Republican Party said that they would focus on if they had control of the House. Why would the Republican leadership and the committee majority give a hearing and a platform to the witnesses today? specifically to Mr. Kennedy, a man who has recently claimed that COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and Black people. The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. And before that, in his film, Medical Racism, The New Apartheid, that film stated that COVID-19 vaccines do not work for Black children because of their, quote, kick-ass kind of immune system, that hyper, superhuman, subhuman kind of language. He also said, even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps to Switzerland. You could hide in an attic like Anne Frank did, to imply Jews in Nazi Germany had more freedoms than unvaccinated Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, many of my Republican colleagues across the dais will rush.
Now, you know, a lot of the vote blue, no matter who, Democrats are just eating this up. But by the way, okay, the game's already rigged. If Biden becomes the nominee, guess what? You have a senile old bat as your, well, champion. Can Biden put together coherent sentences? By the way, you know, there is a lot of pushback of criticism towards RFK Jr., but I'm just noticing the radio silence on all the criticisms of Biden and how he's been on the wrong side of history. Just throwing it out there, Democrats, just throwing it out there.
Cover that they have Mr. Kennedy here because they want to protect his free speech, that they do not believe in American censorship. This is not the kind of free speech that I know of. The free speech that is protected by the Constitution's First Amendment. But free speech is not an absolute. The Supreme Court has stated that. And others' free speech that is allowed, hateful, abusive rhetoric, does not need to be promoted in the halls of the people's house. This Republican charge of free speech is being used by Republican members to promote quasi-science, things such as the
You know, it's very interesting how she talks about free speech, especially how she, this is the same person who wanted to silence and suppress and threaten journalist Matt Taibbi. Don't believe me? Here, just want to just throw this out here real quick, just so all of you can see it as well. Again, this is the same person who wanted to censor and suppress and threaten Matt Taibbi with 5 years in prison. And she's a Democratic delegate to Congress, not an actual representative. She's a delegate. So yeah, I guess she does believe in her own version of free speech. But you better say things she wants to hear or else.
Replacement theory that says that brown people are replacing good white Americans here in this country.
When did RFK Jr. say that? Look, there's a lot of things I disagree with RFK Jr. about. But I think you're putting a lot of things on him that he didn't say. Again, this is why I tell people, you never run Democrat and Democratic Party. You got to deal with so many snowflakes in the Democratic Party. It's a bad idea.
Let's not remember that this country first belonged to brown Native American people. It's a rallying cry for bigotry and hate. There are members of the Republican conference who also frequently suggest that Americans have to deal with COVID rules as the same as oppression of Nazi Germany. Indeed, some have even questioned whether the Holocaust took place.
This is like a vote blue no matter who's wet dream. And don't worry, we're going to hear from RFK Jr. I'm going to make time so we actually hear his entire statement. So he speaks before the people who are trying to censor and silence and suppress. And look, I'm all for free speech. Yes, I believe in free speech. Okay, and there are bad people out there who do abuse it, but there's a lot of good people who do use it properly. But when you have government officials, especially a delegate, a Democrat delegate, who, mind you, just a few months ago was threatening journalist Matt Taibbi for his outstanding work for the Twitter files for 5 years in jail, I have to question, do you truly believe in democracy and the free speech? Do you?
We have staffers who openly follow white supremacy without any condemnation of the Republican Congress. Some give it chuckles, slaps on the back, shrugs, all under the mantra of free speech. It's a free country. You absolutely have a right to say what you believe, but you don't have the right to a platform, public or private. We don't have to give one of the largest platforms.
But it's not going to make it all go away. And see, the thing is, by selectively targeting, again, or putting upon people saying that they're promoting hate speech, right? What you're doing is you're putting everyone on the chopping block. So they have to tiptoe around eggshells to approve to get the approval and nod of government officials like this. Don't fall out of line. Follow orders. But hang on, it gets even crazier, especially when you have people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz adding in her 2 cents. But first, let's listen to RFK Jr.
I want to put aside my written statement for a moment and address one of the points that was brought up. I think an important point by the ranking member, that this body ought to be concerning itself with the issues that impact directly the American people. The rising price of groceries, 76% over the past 2 years for basic food stuff, the war in Ukraine, the inflation issues, the border issues, many other issues that concern us all as a nation. We can't do that without the First Amendment, without debate. When I gave my speech, my announcement speech in Boston 2 months ago, YouTube, I talked about all those issues. I focused on grocery. I focused on the fact that working class people can no longer afford to live in this country. I talked about inflation, all the issues that deeply concern you, and that you've devoted your career to alleviating those issues. 5 minutes into my speech, when I was talking about Paul Revere, YouTube deplatformed me. I didn't talk about vaccines in that speech. I didn't talk about anything that could be.
Oh, RFK Jr., I know that all too well. One time, YouTube gave Harlan's media strike for medical misinformation. But we were talking about how CNN was smearing Joe Rogan. Nowhere in that story did we say anything about what was happening in 2020 or the little flu that was flying around. And, you know, we were able to get that reversed quite quickly. Or there was a time when YouTube gave us a strike when our colleague Kira at the time did a story on adult websites that had very questionable material. And I got to be careful with the words, YouTube. But let's just say questionable material that would hurt people, right? Put people in danger. YouTube and its big brain algorithm said, hey, you're showing adult scenes. This violates our guidelines, which we did not. We were reading articles from reputable, authoritative sources like the New York Times, Reuters, Washington Post. So RFK Jr., man, hey, listen, come on to Harlan's Media. I'll tell you what we went through, buddy. I mean, I almost feel like going with the meme saying, first time. It's
a verboten subject. I just was talking about my campaign and things, the conversation that we ought to be having with each other as Americans. But I was shut down. And that is why the First Amendment's important. Debate, congenial, respectful debate is the fertilizer, it's the water, it's the sunlight for our democracy. We need to be talking to each other. Now, this is a letter that many of you signed, many of my fellow Democrats. I've spent my life in this party. I've devoted my life to the values of this party. This 102 people signed this. This itself is evidence of the problem that this hearing was convened to address. This is an attempt to censor a censorship hearing. The charges in this, and by the way, censorship is antithetical to our party. It was appalling to my father, to my uncle, to FDR, to Harry Truman, to Thomas Jefferson, as the chairman referred to. It is the basis for democracy. It sets us apart from all of the previous forms of government. We need to be able to talk, and the First Amendment was not written for easy speech. It was written for the speech that nobody likes you for. And I was censored not just by the Democratic administration. I was censored by the Trump administration.
So see, first, everything that RFK Jr. is saying, I agree. I agree with it 100%. However, not to get the RFK Jr. supporters angry, but I just need you guys to know this. He's saying this to the wrong party. The Democratic Party doesn't give a damn, RFK Jr. If you're finding out about this now, hang on. It's going to get worse because this Democratic Party doesn't give a damn about free speech. It doesn't. It truly doesn't. So, again, kind of wasting your time being in a Democratic primary, but fine. But both parties, if given the opportunity, the Republican Party would be just as corrupt and just pro-censorship as the Democratic Party is, because both parties are one and the same, pro-censorship.
I was the first person censored by as the chairman pointed out, by the Biden administration 2 days after it came into office. It ordered a truthful, and by the way, they had to invent a new word called malinformation to censor people like me. There was no misinformation on my Instagram account. Everything I put on that account was cited and sourced to peer-reviewed publications or government databases. Nobody has ever pointed to a single piece of misinformation that I publish. I was removed for something they called malinformation. Malinformation is information that is true, but is inconvenient to the government, that they don't want people to hear. And that's antithetical to the values of our country. After I announced my presidency, it became more difficult for people to censor me outright. So now I'm subject to this new form of censorship, which is called targeted propaganda, where people apply pejoratives like anti-vax. I've never been anti-vaccine, but everybody in this room probably believes that I have been.
You could thank corporate media for that. You could thank old Hill Dog and Russiagate and corporate media suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Corporate media dictating to you how to feel and how to think. You know, again, the reason why corporate media is so authoritative and number one on all social media platforms is because they bully their way on. They threaten YouTube and other social media platforms with a lack of ad revenue and so much more. They threaten to keep on exposing social media and bringing it down, saying that they were promoting hate speech. You know, again, YouTube should have stood more firm against corporate media, but they didn't. That's why you're always, after watching Hardlands Media or RBN, you're going to be recommended to watch something from MSNBC and CNN so they could plug you back into the matrix. And not to mention, Kim Iverson did an interview with RFK Jr. that was taken down. RFK Jr.'s conversation with Mike Tyson, a video that was about 2-3 years old, taken down. Anything relating for him being interviewed by somebody, taken down and censored, silenced, suppressed. The Democratic Party does not have free speech as its number one agenda. They want everyone to shut up and follow orders.
That's the prevailing narrative. Anti-Semitism, racism. These are the most appalling, disgusting pejoratives, and they're applied to me to silence me because people don't want me to have that conversation about the war, about groceries, about inflation, about the war on the middle class in this country that we need to be having. And by the way, I want to say this while I'm on the record, that in my entire life, and why I'm under oath, in my entire life, I have never uttered a phrase that was either racist or anti-Semitic. I have spent my life fighting my professional career, fighting for Israel, for the protection of Israel. I have a better...
Man, okay. All right. Talking about the Israeli government. All right. That lobby group sure has a lot of influence.
Record on Israel than anybody in this chamber today. I'm the only person who has publicly objected to the $2 billion payout that the Biden administration is now making to Iran, which is a genocidal program. I'm the only one who's objected to that. I've fought more ferociously for Israel than anybody. But
Okay.
I'm being censored here through this target, through smears, through misinterpretations of what I've said, through lies, through association, which is a tactic that we all thought we had been discredited and dispensed with after the Army McCarthy hearings.
Now, look, I think the reason why he did bring up Israel, it's mentioned in the live stream chat, is saying in his defense, I think this is the response for him being called anti-Semitic, to which I have to say, hey, RFK Jr., I think you either need to get on the phone or, private message Roger Waters and say, hey, dude, I really effed up. I'm sorry. Because Roger Waters was being dragged by corporate media for saying that he was anti-Semitic because of his, production of the, again, performance of The Wall. Which, again, if you really pay attention to the lyrics and what the story is about, it's not pro-fascist. Just throwing it out there, journalists. You might want to do your job. I mean, talent. Hey, talent. You might want to do your job.
The 1950s, but those same weapons are now being deployed against me to silence me. I know many of the people who wrote this letter. I don't believe there's a single person who signed this letter who believes I'm anti-Semitic. I do not believe that.
Again, RFK, man. Dude, RFK Jr., listen. Democratic Party doesn't care. They're given their marching orders and they will do it. They will sign whatever document they have to do. They will stab whoever they want in the back because that's what politicians do. You should know this. You should be familiar with what the Democratic Party is. You say you want the Democratic Party to become what it once was, but it never was what it was. This is its true form. They're pro-censorship, and they will put you on the chopping block.
There is no evidence of that. I want to say something I think that's more important, and it goes directly to what you talked about, ranking member, which is the need, this toxic polarization that is destroying our country today. And how do we deal with that? This kind of division is more dangerous for our country than any time since the American Civil War. And how do we deal with that? How are we going to, every Democrat on this committee believes that we need to end that polarization. Do you think you can do that by censoring people? I'm telling you, you cannot.
And this will come back to haunt the Democrats because here's the thing, especially vote blue no matter who. I know you're happy, especially when before Elon Musk took over Twitter, everyone was happy that Trump was being removed. But all what you did was give him more power. All these social justice warriors who want to cancel, silence. You do realize that eventually people have what's called a comeback, right? And that people eventually move on. There's a blurring effect. At least I call it a blurring effect on social media where, somebody gets canceled, but then a few years later, they're back. And people really don't care why they're canceled. In fact, you really want to know the whole truth, social justice warriors and people who cancel triggered vote blue no matter who and Democratic politicians. And yes, even Republican politicians. And yes, there are social justice warriors on the Republican side too. I'm going to tell you the real truth, the dark secret that you're going to have to come to terms with. All the people you want to cancel, all this yelling on top of the rooftop because somebody said something that triggered you or made you feel upset and angry. Or there's a movie or TV show that should be reimagined or, or something else. No one cares. That's the real dark truth. No one cares. Yeah, Trump was canceled, but guess what? He didn't care. He came back. He's back again. He's running again. Think his volunteers and supporters cared? Oh, maybe a little bit, but then guess what? They realized that Trump wasn't going to abandon them. And yes, let's be very clear here. Republican politicians are just as scummy as Democratic politicians, but they're back. They're here. They're not going to go away. No one cares. And I'll even go a step further. All these people who are pro-censorship, cancel, silence, SJWs, what I found interesting? All those protests that I covered where people were yelling and screaming in the streets about Trump being a threat. None of you cared either. That's right. People like AOC, she doesn't care either. No, they don't. And you want to know why? Because when Biden got elected into office, they all went to brunch. The kids are still in cages. Roe v. Wade got overturned. Hey, pink pussy hat people. I thought you were going to flood the streets. You were saying that. You were posting that all over social media. You were getting the validations and retweets, but when push comes to shove, y'all didn't. Because you don't care.
That only aggravates and amplifies the problem. We need to start being kind to each other. We need to start being respectful to each other. We need to start restoring the comedy to this chamber and to the rest of America. But it has to.
He said a dangerous word, comedy. Heaven forbid. Dave Chappelle tells a joke.
Start here. My uncle Edward Kennedy has more legislation with his name on it than any senator in United States history. Why is that? Because he was able to reach across the aisle, because he didn't deal in insults, because he didn't try to censor people. He brought home people who were antithetical to what he believed in. He came home almost every weekend with people like Orrin Hatch to our house at the compound in Hyannisport. At that time, Orrin Hatch to me was like Darth Vader, because I was an environmentalist. And I was saying, why is Teddy bringing this guy home? But he knew that he was effective because he understood that comedy and respect and kindness and compassion and empathy for other people is the way that the only way to restore the function in this chamber. But more importantly, today we need to give an example in the leadership of our country of being respectful to each other.
No, you can't ask the SJWs to do that. You can't ask the Vote Blue, no matter who people, to do that. Even the Democratic politicians, they won't do that either. And you want to know why? Because they want power. They want to control what you think, say, and feel. They don't want you to think for yourselves. And just to be very clear here, yes, even Republican politicians will do the exact same thing too.
If you think I said something that's anti-Semitic, let's talk about the details. I'm telling you all the things that I'm accused of right now by you. And in this letter are distortions, they're misrepresentations. I didn't say those things.
Again, RFK. First time.
There's fragments that I said, but I denounce anybody who uses the words that I have said to imply something that is negative about people who are Jewish. I never said those things. And I want to point out also that the chairman pointed to Dennis Kucinich, who's fighting behind me. There is no two people in the country who feel more differently about American politics than these two people. And yet they were friends. Dennis attended his children's basketball games, attended his daughter's wedding. This is what we need, how we need to start treating each other in this country. We have to stop trying to destroy each other, to marginalize, to vilify, to gaslight each other. We have to find that place inside of ourselves of light, of empathy, of compassion, and above all, we need to elevate the Constitution of the United States, which was written for hard times. And that has to be the premier compass for all of our activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Now, with all that said, let's bring up everyone's favorite person in the world, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. What do you think she's going to do?
Into House Rule 11, Clause 2, which Mr. Kennedy is violative of, I move that we remove into executive session because Mr. Kennedy has repeatedly made despicable anti-Semitic and anti-Asian comments as recently as last week. Rule 11, Clause.
She chooses a censor because that's all what Debbie Wasserman Schultz knows what to do. By the way, she looks terrible.
Clause 2 says whenever it is asserted by a member of the committee that the evidence or testimony at a hearing may tend to defame, degrade, or incriminate any person, or it is asserted by a witness that the evidence or testimony that the witness would give at a hearing may tend to defame, degrade, or incriminate the witness, and it goes on. Mr. Kennedy, among many other things, has said, I know a lot now about bioweapons. We put out hundreds of millions of dollars into ethnically targeted microbes. The Chinese have done the same thing. In fact, COVID-19, there is an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacks certain races disproportionately. The races that are most immune to COVID-19 are—
A lady making a motion or a speech.
I've made a motion to move into executive session because Mr. Kennedy's testimony—
Mr. Chairman, I
and
move
his
to table the
previous
motion.
statements—
Gentleman from,
All right, that was funny. That was funny.
Kentucky has moved to table.
Mr.
Questions on
Mr.
the-
Chairman, I ask
questions-
for a roll call vote on the motion to table.
Well, let me ask the question. The question is on the motion to table. The gentlelady has asked for a roll call vote. The clerk will have to step back for a second. The clerk will have to come in. We'll call the roll on the motion to table, and then we can get back to testimony.
I think the witnesses can sit in the chairs sitting behind.
I'll leave that up to the clerks. If the clerks are comfortable with that. Yeah, why don't we do that? Maybe we can go right down here.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Gentleman from Louisiana.
Is it the custom of this committee to censor viewpoints that we disagree with from witnesses?
Mr. Chairman, I have—
Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Debbie, you're on that super fast rush. See, this is a part of the reason why I'm kind of sort of glad the Democrats don't have control over the House, because I got to tell you, things would look pretty grim for RFK Jr. and a lot of us if the Democrats had their way. Now, that doesn't make the Republicans any better. It's just I find it interesting that Debbie Wasserman's cookie, her glass of milk and cookies have been taken away from her.
It's not a point of
I have a
order.
motion on the table
There's a motion and the vote's
to
been
move into
called.
executive
House
session
rules.
We're waiting
because
for,
Mr.
we're waiting for the
Kennedy
clerks.
is violative of
Waiting
Rule
for the
11,
clerks.
Clause 2.
Waiting for the clerks. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan.
Yes.
Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Issa. Mr. Massey.
Yes, to not censor.
Mr. Massey votes yes. Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart votes yes. Ms. Stefanik.
Yes.
Ms. Stefanik votes yes. Mr. Gates. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes yes. Mr. Armstrong.
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong votes yes. Mr. Stubbe. Mr. Bishop.
Yes.
Mr. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Kamak.
Yes.
Ms. Kamak votes yes. Ms. Hageman. Ms. Hageman votes yes. Ms. Pasquette.
No, I want to follow the rules that the Republicans made at the beginning of this conference with these House.
She's a delegate, not a House representative. This is the same person who wanted to put Matt Taibbi in jail for 5 years. A journalist, award-winning journalist.
Rules, so no.
Ms. Pasquette votes no. Mr. Lynch.
No.
Mr. Lynch votes no. Ms. Sanchez.
No, because it's violative of the rules.
Ms. Sanchez.
Hey, RFK, man. Listen, not going to tell you what to do. RFK Jr. supporters not going to tell you what to do, but you're wasting your time being in the Democratic Party, okay? Just throwing it out there. But good luck. Good luck. I'll be covering the Democratic Convention in 2024.
Votes no. Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
No to allowing a witness to degrade and
This is not
others.
speech
It's
time.
not, it's not speech time. Be quiet, lady.
Violate the rules and not have his testimony and degradation and amplified
Mr. Chair.
rather than given an executive session.
Ms. Wasserman Schultz votes no. Mr. Connolly.
No to the
Miss-
Soviet Politburo.
Mr.
What? That hurt my brain.
Connolly votes no. Mr. Garamendi.
No.
Mr. Garamendi votes no. Mr. Allred. Ms. Garcia.
No.
Ms. Garcia votes no. Mr. Goldman.
No to hate speech.
Mr. Goldman votes
Hate speech.
no.
Jeez. Mr. Gates. Yes.
Mr. Gates. Mr. Gates votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 8 noes.
Ah! Oh, take that vote, Blue, no matter who. Okay, hey, Republicans, you get a thumbs up from me just this one time, but no, I will never support or vote for a Republican. But you know what? That was beautiful. That was great. Debbie, just calm down. Have a cup of tea. You did all that grandstanding and for a whopping 0. Hey, let's have some smiley laughing emojis in the chat just for all of us.
The motion to table is agreed to.
So there you go. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Debbie Wasserman Schultz wants to censor and suppress, quiet everything down. I want to pull up another video as well.
Is the subject line says flagging Hank Aaron misinformation. Now, misinformation is when you don't have the facts right. You're saying things that aren't true. But when you look at Mr. Kennedy's tweet, there was nothing in there that was factually inaccurate. Hank Aaron, real person, great American, passed away after he got the vaccine, pointing out facts. And yet the White House on the third day was trying, actually 1:04 a.m. on January 23rd, 2021, 37 hours into the administration, they were trying to censor Mr. Kennedy. I find that interesting. The irony here, trying to censor the guy who's actually their Democrat primary opponent. Is the subject line.
Now, I also want to pull up something else here, too, because if we're talking about censorship, we got to bring up something that was deemed fake news. All happened at the same time. Let's play this.
The motion.
This is the continuation. This is the continuation of the aftermath of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, well, trying to, censor RFK Jr.
Motion to table is agreed to. We will now move to our second witness. Ms. Morris, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Now, for those of you who don't know, this is one of the people who broke that story about Hunter Biden's laptop story.
Thanks so much for inviting me. My name is Emma Jo Morris, politics editor at Breitbart. I'm here today because I published a series of news stories 3 years ago in October of 2020 about Hunter Biden's now infamous laptop, also known as the laptop from hell, which is seen as some of the most scandalous reporting of the last decade. What was more scandalous than the reporting itself, though, was the fact that it exposed the unholy alliance between the intelligence community, social media platforms, and legacy media outlets. At the time, I was deputy politics editor at the New York Post, and my reporting showed that despite then candidates Joe Biden's repeated and furious denials, he was apparently involved in the foreign business deals of his family. Over several days, just weeks before Americans would vote for their next president, I revealed verified, authentic emails from the Biden Scions hard drive showing Ukrainian business partners receiving leaks from the Obama White House. I documented an off-the-books meeting between then Vice President Biden and a Ukrainian energy executive and introduced the world to the big guy who got action on a deal with CEFC, China Energy Company. The Post published exactly how the material for the reporting was obtained, even identifying our sources, as well as a federal subpoena showing the FBI was in possession of the material the story was based on and had been since December of 2019. But when the stories appeared on social media that morning, the venue where millions of Americans go to find their news and editors to get their angles, within hours, the reporting was censored on all major platforms on the basis of being called hacked or Russian disinformation.
Which, again, if you haven't seen Matt Orfala's compilation video, please do so. And again, he too is also being censored. RBN's being censored and suppressed. INN's being censored and suppressed. A lot of people being censored and suppressed. Tell me, let's have democracy in the chat. Do you like being told what to think, what to view, what to watch, how to act? Type 1 for yes, I like to follow orders. Type 2, no, I hate it. To hell with censorship. Right here.
Twitter refused to allow users to share the link to the stories, banned the links from being shared in private messages, a policy, by the way, that's used to clamp down on child porn, and locked the Post out of its verified account. Facebook said it would curb distribution and reach of the links on its platform. However, the stories were not based on hacked materials, nor were they Russian disinformation. And despite those claims appearing to come out of thin air at the time, we would eventually learn that they actually didn't come out of thin air at all. On October 19th, 5 days after the Post began publishing, Politico ran a story headlined, "Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former intel officials say." God, I can't even say that with a straight face, you know?
Yeah, that's what corporate media was putting its weight, saying it was Russia, 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 Russia. Thanks, Hill Dog and Vote Blue No Matter Who, for having people lose their ability to think critically.
Politico printed a letter completely uncritically from veteran members of the U.S. intelligence community, falsely claiming that the Post expose has, quote, all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. My God. Most notable among the signatories of that letter were Jim Clapper, from former DNI, Michael Hayden, former CIA, John Brennan, former CIA, despite having such damaged credibility following their participation in the Russia collusion conspiracy theory. A few days later, on October 22nd, when Biden appeared in the second presidential debate and was confronted with the facts of the Post reporting, he said to Trump, quote, 50 former national intelligence professionals said this. What he's accusing me of is a Russian plot. But it was not. And he knew that. Now,
notice again, the Democrats are there just like, I can't believe someone's using their right First Amendment to speak.
fast forward to this year, 3 years later. Just last spring, House investigators revealed it was a call by now Secretary of State Antony Blinken to former acting CIA Director Michael Morell that prompted the spy letter published by Politico, which bypassed agency approval processes that would have been normally applied. It is also now known that ahead of my reporting, federal agencies were priming social media companies to execute an operation to discredit it. According to internal documents released by Elon Musk upon his acquisition of Twitter, the FBI and other intelligence community members essentially directed the platform's censorship operation, in part externally by working with top management and in part internally by social media companies hiring eye-popping numbers of agency alumni. Journalist Michael Schallenberger reported, based on documents he obtained from Musk, that during all of 2020, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies repeatedly primed Twitter executives to dismiss reports of Hunter Biden's laptop as a Russian hack and leak operation. Feds arranged for top secret security clearances to be granted to Twitter management and even had encrypted messaging networks set up, which they dubbed a virtual war room. To this day, hundreds of people from the intelligence community work at social media companies. Over the last few years, my reporting has been confirmed by virtually every mainstream news outlet, from the Washington Post to the New York Times to Politico, when the stakes were nothing, by the way, 2 years later. No one denies that the laptop is real, that the origin story is exactly what I told you it was in the first place.
And again, I am happy that she is speaking her truth, and I'm glad that she's rubbing in the face of Congress. Hey, Democrats, vote blue no matter who. Everything that you fought for was a lie. You just wanted to go ahead and be back on brunch. What's it like knowing that your whole reality is crumbling apart and that no one is believing you anymore, Democrats?
Elaborate censorship conspiracy wasn't because the information being reported on was false. It was because it was true, and it was a threat to the power centers in this country. What this relationship between the US government officials and American corporations represent is an unprecedented push to undermine the First Amendment, the right to think, write, read, say whatever we want. And how we respond will determine whether we see a free press as inalienable or as optional. Thanks.
Yep. Now, I do want to just pull up one more video here. Now, remember, Stacey Plaskett, that's the person who wanted to put Matt Taibbi in jail for 5 years. Just want to say that there's a video exchange of her trying to censor Kennedy as well.
You tried to associate me a moment ago with the replacement theory, which is racist.
No, I did not say you
Time
had the
belongs to the
replacement
gentleman
theory.
from-
I
I
said
did
my
not-
colleagues.
Time belongs to the gentleman from.
I denounce that theory. It is racist, and I have never endorsed it or had any association with it. Our film on a medical, by the way,
Medical
Bill
apartheid?
Buxton, who is the black CDC official, who ultimately exposed the Tuskegee experiment, tried for years and years to appeal to CDC to stop it for 40 years. Finally, he got relief by walking into my uncle's office in the building next door. Teddy held hearings and ended the experiment. I remember that very well. And to say that I created a film that encourages blacks not to get adequate medical care is just completely abhorrent.
Don't misuse my words.
It's the witness's time. Do not censor the witness.
Come on, Democrats, be better, be best.
I'm not censoring the witness. I'm not censoring the witness. He's still talking.
It's my time and I've given it to the witness. Do not censor him.
I'm not censoring him.
If the views that you and others have applied to me, I've attributed to me, if they were actually true, I can see why I shouldn't be able to testify here today. Those are not true. These are defamations and malignancies that are used to censor me, to prevent people from listening to the actual things that I'm saying. And I think, ranking member, that we should have a real conversation rather than an exchange of ad hominem attacks.
And again, we should have an exchange. There should be more free speech. So how should we end this segment? How should we end this segment, especially when it comes time to really be talking about social issues and censorship? The media want to silence individuals for thinking for themselves. Our politicians that want to censor you. Listen, folks, you got to break away from this mentality of silence, censor, and suppress. It solves nothing in the end. In fact, it causes the problem to keep on getting worse. We're going to have to learn to talk to each other. That's right, Vote Blue, no matter who. I'm going to take Dr. Cornel West and RFK Jr.'s policy of reaching out and talking. And I get it. I get it. But see, the thing is, Democrats, you should be better. But instead, you let Trump derangement syndrome and everything else get the better of you. You let corporate media swindle you and lie to you. You let the establishment play you along. And so long as you are on this path of pro-censorship, know this, that someday you, maybe by accident, might fall out of line. And then you will be put on the chopping block. And there'll be no one there to speak for you. Censorship, cancel culture, it's BS and a waste of time. And I'm glad that RFK Jr. was at least able to speak out. But notice, again, how quick the Democrats wanted to silence the witness. But I also want to point out as well that the Republican Party is just as capable of being pro-censorship as the Democratic Party. They've done it in the past. And in that statement, RFK Jr. brought up the fact that the Trump administration tried to censor him. Last I checked, the Trump administration was a Republican administration. We got to break away from this mentality of censorship, and both parties are capable of silencing us. We need to stand for free speech. And I invite RFK Jr. to be on our show because I want to talk to him about it. Because, you know, him being shocked about being censored, Heartlands Media knows a thing or two about being censored. It's your first time? Yeah. It's going to keep on getting worse until people say no more. And I'm for free speech now more than ever.